Lila Hart stood before Adrian Moretti's office door, her hands trembling as she realized her life was about to change forever. Inside, the city's most powerful crime lord waited with a brutal offer: marry him or watch her mother die in agony. With no other choice, Lila stepped into that luxurious room, knowing she was trading her freedom for her mother's survival. What she didn't know was that Adrian Moretti had been watching her for months, and this marriage contract was only the beginning of a dark obsession that would consume them both. If you want to see how this story unfolds, please watch until the end, hit the like button, and comment with your city so I can see how far this story has traveled. Ian. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Adrian Moretti's penthouse office, each drop a tiny percussion against glass that cost more than most people earned in a year. Lila stood in the center of that vast room, feeling small and exposed under the cold track lighting that made everything gleam: the marble floors, the sleek furniture, the man himself. Adrian sat behind his desk, perfectly still, watching her with the kind of attention that made her skin crawl. He was younger than she'd expected. The rumors painted him as some ancient demon, but he couldn't have been more than 35, with dark hair swept back from a face that would have been handsome if it wasn't so completely devoid of warmth. His suit probably cost more than her entire year's rent. Everything about him screamed money and power, the kind that came from places she didn't want to think about. "Miss Hart," he said, his voice low and measured, "you're late." "The buses don't run on your schedule," Lila shot back before she could stop herself. Fear made her sharp sometimes, gave her a mouth that got her in trouble. One of his eyebrows lifted, just slightly. "No, they don't." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit." She wanted to refuse on principle, but her legs were shaking so badly she was afraid she'd collapse if she didn't. The leather chair was obscenely comfortable, the kind that probably adjusted to your body temperature and posture. She perched on the edge of it, refusing to sink back. "Do you know why you're here?" Adrian asked. "Because you sent 3 men to my apartment at midnight and told me I didn't have a choice." Accurate, but incomplete. He opened a folder on his desk, barely glancing at it. "Your mother, Caroline Hart, was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer 6 months ago. The public hospital gave her 6 to 8 months without treatment, possibly 18 with aggressive intervention. You've been working 3 jobs trying to afford care that still won't save her life." Lila's throat tightened. Hearing it laid out so clinically, so precisely, made it worse somehow. "How do you know that?" "I know everything about you, Lila." He said her name like he'd been practicing it, like he'd rolled it around in his mouth before and found it pleasing. "I know you work the morning shift at Rosie's Diner, the afternoon shift at the public library, and 4 nights a week you clean office buildings downtown. I know you're 26 years old and you've never left the city limits. I know you dropped out of community college when your mother got sick. I know you eat 1 meal a day so you can afford her pain medication." Each fact landed like a slap. You had someone following me. For 3 months." The casual admission made her stomach turn. "Why?" Adrian leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled under his chin. "Because I needed to be certain." "Of what?" "That you were desperate enough to accept my offer, and strong enough to survive what comes after." Lila stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the marble. "I don't know what kind of sick game this is, but I'm leaving. Sit down." "No, sit down." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Adrian didn't raise his voice, didn't move, but something in his tone made it clear this wasn't a request anymore. "You came here because you want to save your mother's life. The door is behind you. You can leave right now, go back to your 3 jobs and your dying mother, and pretend this conversation never happened. Or you can sit down and listen to the only real chance she has." Lila's hands clenched into fists. She hated him, hated his money, his power, his certainty that she'd do exactly what he wanted. But he was right. She sat. "Smart girl," Adrian said, something that might have been approval flickering across his face. "Here's what I'm offering. I will pay for your mother's treatment at the best cancer center in the country. Experimental therapies, the top specialists, everything. I'll cover her housing during treatment, her medication, her recovery. Full-time nursing care. Whatever it takes." Lila's heart hammered against her ribs. "Why would you do that?" Because in exchange, you'll marry me. The words hung in the air between them, absurd and terrible. Lila laughed, a sharp, broken sound. You're insane. I'm many things. Insane isn't one of them. People don't just buy wives. They do all the time. Adrian pulled out another folder, this one thicker. Marriage contract, prenuptial agreement, medical authorization forms for your mother's care. Everything is legal and binding. You'll live in my home, attend functions as my wife, and present the image of a stable marriage. In return, your mother receives treatment that will actually save her life. This is trafficking, Lila said, her voice shaking. This is a business arrangement between two consenting adults, Adrian interrupted. You're free to refuse. I won't force you. But your mother has maybe 4 months left without intervention. The treatment I'm offering would start tomorrow. Tomorrow. The word was a knife twisting in her chest. Why me? You could marry anyone. You could actually fall in love with someone instead of whatever the hell this is. For the first time, something almost human flickered across Adrian's face. Love is a liability in my world. I need a wife, and I need her to be someone who won't mistake this arrangement for something it isn't. Someone who's smart enough to play the role and practical enough to accept the terms. You mean someone desperate enough? Yes. At least he was honest about it. Lila looked down at her hands, rough and red from bleach and hot water, nails bitten to the quick. Her mother was dying. Every day she watched Caroline fade a little more, watched the light go out of her eyes as the pain got worse. The doctors had stopped talking about treatment and started talking about comfort measures. Hospice. How long? Lila asked quietly. Minimum 3 years. After that, if you want out, we'll arrange a quiet divorce. Your mother's care continues regardless. And if I want out before 3 years? Adrian's eyes were flat and dark. Then the contract is void, and the medical care stops immediately. That's evil. That's insurance. I'm investing significant resources in this arrangement. I need to know you won't walk away the moment your mother is stable. Lila stood up again, but this time she walked to the window, pressing her forehead against the cold glass. Below, the city sprawled out in a mess of lights and shadows, millions of people going about their lives, oblivious to the nightmare unfolding in this pristine tower. What exactly would you expect from me? She asked, still facing the window. Public appearances, charity functions, occasional business dinners. You'll live in the penthouse, have your own rooms, a driver, security. I'll provide a clothing allowance and cover all your expenses. And privately, you stay out of my business and I'll stay out of yours. I don't expect intimacy. The marriage is for appearance only. Lila turned around. Then why bother getting married at all? Why not just hire an actress? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Because I need it to be real, legally binding, unbreakable. The people in my world can smell a fake a mile away. The people in your world, Lila repeated, you mean criminals. I mean people who would use any weakness against me. He stood, buttoning his suit jacket. I need a wife who can't be bought off or scared away, someone who has as much to lose as I do. So I'm collateral. You're a partner in a mutually beneficial agreement. Adrian walked around the desk, stopping a few feet away from her. Up close, she could see the small scar above his left eyebrow, the faint shadow of stubble along his jaw. He smelled like expensive cologne and something sharper, dangerous. Your mother lives. You live in comfort instead of poverty. All you have to do is play a role and give up my freedom. You don't have freedom now. You're a slave to debt and circumstance. This is just a different cage, but a more comfortable one. Lila wanted to hit him, wanted to scream that he knew nothing about her life, her choices, her mother. But the worst part was that he was right. She was trapped already, drowning slowly while everyone around her pretended not to notice. I need to think about it, she said. You have until midnight tonight. After that, the offer expires. That's less than 8 hours. I'm aware. Adrian returned to his desk, already turning his attention back to whatever paperwork demanded his focus. My driver will take you home. He'll return at 11:45 for your answer. Lila stood there, trembling with anger and fear and something else she couldn't name. What if I say no? Adrian didn't look up. Then I wish you and your mother the best. The dismissal was clear. Lila turned and walked toward the door, her footsteps echoing in that cavernous office. She was almost to the exit when his voice stopped her. Lila. She turned. He was watching her again, that same intense focus that made her feel pinned to the wall like a butterfly under glass. I'm not a good man, Adrian said quietly, but I keep my promises. If you agree to this, your mother will receive the best care available. That, at least, you can count on. It wasn't comfort, it wasn't reassurance, but it was something. Lila left without answering. The apartment was dark when she got home, just the blue glow of the television flickering in the living room. Her mother was asleep on the couch again, too weak to make it to bed most nights. Lila stood in the doorway, watching Caroline's chest rise and fall, each breath a little more labored than the last. She'd lost so much weight. The cancer had hollowed her out, turned her into a shadow of the vibrant woman who'd raised Lila alone after her father died. Caroline had worked 2 jobs her whole life to keep them afloat, had sacrificed everything to make sure Lila had food and clothes and a chance at something better. Now it was Lila's turn to sacrifice. She sat down on the floor next to the couch, resting her head against the cushion near her mother's hand. Caroline's fingers were cold and bony, the skin paper-thin. Lila took her hand gently, careful not to wake her. I don't know what to do, she whispered into the darkness. Her mother didn't answer. The television played some late-night infomercial, people with perfect teeth selling products that promised to change your life. Everything was for sale if you had enough money. Everything. Even her. Lila thought about Adrian Moretti's office, the cold precision of his offer. A business arrangement, a transaction, 3 years of her life in exchange for her mother's survival. Was it really a choice if there was only one answer she could live with? She thought about the alternative. Watching her mother fade away, listening to her cry in pain in the middle of the night, holding her hand while hospice nurses whispered about dignity and letting go. She'd already started making those preparations in her head, planning a funeral she couldn't afford, trying to figure out how to honor a life when you had nothing to your name. Or she could marry a stranger, a criminal, a man who'd had her followed for months, who'd calculated her desperation down to the last dollar. Lila closed her eyes. I'm sorry, Mom. Yeah. The driver returned exactly at 11:45, idling in front of her building with the kind of black luxury car that didn't belong in this neighborhood. Lila climbed into the back seat without looking at anyone, her hands clutching the small purse she'd packed with her ID and the few important documents she owned. We're not going to the office, she told the driver. No, ma'am. Mr. Moretti is waiting at the penthouse. Of course he was. Probably already certain of her answer. The building was in the financial district, all glass and steel and marble. The doorman greeted them with a nod that suggested he'd been expecting her. The elevator required a key card to access the top floor. Everything was controlled, monitored, locked down tight. When the doors opened directly into the penthouse, Lila stepped out into a space that belonged in a magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, art that was probably worth more than her life. It was beautiful and cold and completely impersonal. Adrian was standing by the windows, still in a suit, looking out at the city like he owned it. Maybe he did, in a way. You came, he said without turning around. Did you doubt I would? No. He turned to face her. You're practical. It's one of the things I like about you. You don't know me well enough to like anything about me. I know enough. He gestured to the dining table where papers were spread out in neat stacks. The contracts are ready. My lawyer is on standby to notarize everything. Lila walked over to the table, looking down at the dense legal text. I want some changes. Adrian's eyebrow lifted. Such as? My mother's care continues even if something happens to you. If you die, if you disappear, whatever. The medical care doesn't stop. Agreed. What else? I want it in writing that I can visit her whenever I want, no restrictions. Done. And I want my own money, an allowance or whatever you want to call it, but in my own account. I'm not asking for much, just enough that I'm not completely dependent on you for every single thing. Adrian considered this, then nodded. $5,000 a month, direct deposit. Lila's head spun. That was more than she'd made in 3 months at all her jobs combined. That's non-negotiable, Adrian said, You'll need appropriate clothing and personal items. It's a reasonable amount for someone in your position. Her position. His wife. The thought made her nauseous. Anything else? Adrian asked. Lila looked up at him, this stranger she was about to bind herself to. What do I call you? Adrian. We're going to be married. First names seem appropriate. And you'll call me Lila? I already do. She picked up the pen, her hand surprisingly steady. Where do I sign? Adrian moved beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat of him, and began pointing out the signature lines. His lawyer appeared from another room. Lila hadn't even realized someone else was there, and witnessed each signature with professional efficiency. When it was done, when every page was signed and dated and notarized, Adrian pulled out a small box from his jacket pocket. You'll need this, he said, opening it to reveal a ring. It was beautiful, of course. A platinum band with a diamond so large it looked obscene. Lila stared at it, her throat tight. I can't wear that. You have to. People will expect it. People will think I robbed a jewelry store. People will think you married a wealthy man. Adrian took the ring out of the box, reaching for her hand. Left hand. Lila let him take her hand, let him slide that cold metal onto her finger. It fit perfectly, because of course it did. He'd probably measured her while she was sleeping, or something equally invasive. The weight of it felt wrong. Final. The wedding is scheduled for Friday, Adrian said, releasing her hand. Small ceremony, just what's legally required. I've arranged for your mother to be transported to the medical center on Thursday. Treatment begins next week. That's 3 days from now. I don't see the point in waiting. Lila looked down at the ring, watching it catch the light. No, I guess there isn't. Your belongings will be moved here tomorrow. I've prepared rooms for you in the East Wing. You'll have privacy. The East Wing, Lila repeated numbly. How big is this place? 6,000 square feet. You'll get used to it. She wouldn't. She'd never get used to any of this. Adrian checked his watch, a flash of gold at his wrist. It's late. I'll show you to your rooms. He led her through the penthouse, past spaces that looked barely lived in, until they reached a door at the far end. Inside was a bedroom suite larger than her entire apartment, all decorated in soft grays and whites, with an attached bathroom that had a tub the size of a small pool. If you need anything, there's a phone by the bed, Adrian said from the doorway. Press 1 for the kitchen, 2 for housekeeping, 3 for security. What about you? I'm 4. He paused. But you won't need to call me. I'll leave you alone unless it's necessary. Right. The arrangement. The arrangement, Adrian agreed. Something flickered in his eyes, gone too fast to identify. Good night, Lila. He closed the door, and she was alone in a stranger's home, wearing a stranger's ring, bound by contracts and desperation to a life she didn't choose. Lila sat down on the edge of the massive bed, and finally let herself cry. The next 3 days passed in a blur of activity that Lila barely participated in. People came and went from the penthouse, designers with clothing samples, a hairstylist, someone who claimed to be a personal shopper. They measured her, evaluated her, discussed her like she was a mannequin being dressed for a window display. Adrian was mostly absent, appearing only for brief moments before disappearing into his office or leaving the building entirely. When he was around, he watched her with that same intense focus, but he never tried to talk to her beyond the necessary logistics. Her mother was transported to the medical center on Thursday, just as promised. Lila went with her in the ambulance, holding Caroline's hand while nurses discussed treatment protocols and medication schedules. The facility was stunning, more like a luxury hotel than a hospital, with private rooms and views of the park. Baby, her mother whispered, weak but conscious. What did you do? Lila smoothed her mother's hair back from her forehead. But I had to. That ring. Don't worry about it, Mom. Just focus on getting better. Caroline's eyes filled with tears. I don't want you to sacrifice yourself for me. But it was already done. The papers were signed. The wedding was tomorrow. It's not a sacrifice, Lila lied. I want to do this. Her mother knew better, but she was too tired to argue. She fell asleep holding Lila's hand, and Lila sat there until the nurses gently suggested she should go home and rest. Home. The penthouse wasn't home. It was a prison made of marble and glass. The wedding took place in a judge's chambers with two witnesses Lila had never met. She wore a simple cream dress that probably cost a fortune, and Adrian wore another perfect suit. The ceremony lasted maybe 10 minutes. The judge read the legal language in a bored monotone. They exchanged the required words, and then it was done. Adrian Moretti slid another ring onto her finger, a matching band to sit below the engagement ring. His hands were steady. Hers were shaking. "You may kiss the bride," the judge said. Adrian's eyes met hers, asking a silent question. Lila gave the tiniest nod, and he leaned in, pressing his lips to hers in a kiss so brief and chaste it barely counted. But his mouth was warm, and she felt the touch of it all the way down to her toes. When he pulled back, something had changed in his expression. Hunger, maybe. Or possession. "Congratulations," the judge said, already gathering his papers. "You're married." And just like that, Lila Hart became Lila Moretti. The penthouse felt different when they returned. More oppressive, somehow. Adrian had arranged for a small dinner to be delivered, their wedding reception, apparently. But Lila couldn't eat. She pushed food around her plate while Adrian watched her from across the table. "You should eat something," he said. "I'm not hungry." "You barely weighed anything when I first saw you. You need to take better care of yourself." "Why do you care?" Adrian set down his fork with precise care. "You're my wife now. Your well-being reflects on me." "Right. The appearance of things." "Yes." Lila threw her napkin on the table and stood up. "I'm going to bed. We have a function tomorrow night, a charity gala. You'll need to be ready by 7. "Of course we do." She started to walk away, then turned back. "When do I get to see my mother again?" "Whenever you want. I told you that. I want to see her tomorrow, before the gala." "I'll arrange it." Lila nodded and left without another word. In her bedroom, because she couldn't think of it as anything else, she peeled off the expensive dress and stood under the shower until the water ran cold. The rings stayed on. She'd tried to take them off earlier, but they felt stuck somehow, branded onto her skin. She was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, when she heard a knock at her door. For a moment, she considered ignoring it, but the knock came again, patient and persistent. "Come in," she called. Adrian opened the door but didn't enter, standing in the threshold like a vampire waiting for permission. He changed out of his suit into dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. It was the most casual she'd seen him. "I wanted to check on you," he said. "I'm fine." "You're not, but I appreciate the effort." Lila sat up, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. "What do you want, Adrian?" He was quiet for a moment, his hand resting on the doorframe. "I know this isn't what you would have chosen. I know you hate me for putting you in this position, but I meant what I said. I'll keep my promises. Your mother will be taken care of. You'll be safe here. This doesn't have to be terrible. It's a cage." "Yes," he admitted, "but it's a very comfortable cage, and in time you might find it's not as unbearable as you think." "Is that supposed to make me feel better?" "No, it's supposed to be honest." Adrian shifted, and for the first time, he looked almost uncertain. "I'm not good at this, at people, but I'll try not to make this harder than it has to be." Lila wanted to throw something at him, wanted to scream that he'd already made it as hard as possible, that he'd bought her like property, and expected her to be grateful for the privilege. But she was exhausted, emotionally and physically, and she didn't have the energy for a fight. "Good night, Adrian," she said instead. He nodded and pulled the door closed, leaving her alone in the dark. The next 2 weeks established a pattern. Adrian left early in the morning before Lila was awake and returned late in the evening. She spent her days visiting her mother at the medical center, watching Caroline grow stronger as the treatments took hold. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, talking about remission possibilities instead of pain management. Lila should have been happy about that. She was happy, but the joy was tainted by the knowledge of what it had cost. She attended 3 functions with Adrian in those first weeks: a charity gala, a business dinner, and some kind of art auction. Each time she played the role of devoted wife, smiling at the right moments, making small talk with people whose jewelry could have fed a neighborhood. Adrian was always nearby, his hand possessive at the small of her back, introducing her to men with cold eyes and women with calculating smiles. "You're doing well," he told her in the car after the art auction. "They believe it." "Believe what?" "That this is real. That you married me because you wanted to, not because you had to." Lila looked out the window at the passing city lights. "I'm a good liar, apparently. It's a useful skill in my world." She turned to face him. "Your world. You keep saying that, but you never actually tell me what it is you do." Adrian's expression closed off, the brief moment of openness disappearing. "Import and export." "That's not an answer. It's the only answer you need. I'm your wife. Don't I have a right to know what I've gotten myself into?" "No." The word was flat, final. "That wasn't part of our arrangement. You don't ask about my business, and I don't involve you in it. That was the deal." Lila's hands clenched in her lap. The deal, right. They rode the rest of the way in silence. Back at the penthouse, Lila kicked off the painful heels she'd been forced to wear and headed straight for her room. She was halfway down the hall when Adrian's voice stopped her. "Lila." She turned, exhausted and irritable. "What?" "Sambua ti iPods?" He was standing in the middle of the living room, his jacket discarded, tie loosened. He looked tired, too, she realized. There were shadows under his eyes, tension in his shoulders. "You did well tonight," he said. "I know this isn't easy for you, but you're adapting. I appreciate that." It wasn't quite a thank you, but it was close. Lila didn't know what to do with it. "I'm going to bed," she said. Adrian nodded, already turning away. "Good night." Lila made it to her room and closed the door before the tears came. She cried quietly, her face pressed into the pillow, mourning a life she'd never get back and a freedom she'd traded for her mother's survival. She didn't hear Adrian standing outside her door, his hand raised to knock, then falling back to his side. She didn't know he stayed there for a full minute, listening to her cry, before finally walking away. The pattern held for another week before it started to crack. Lila woke up one morning to find Adrian still in the penthouse, standing in the kitchen with a coffee cup in his hand, staring at his phone with an expression that could have cut glass. He looked up when she entered, and something in his face shifted. Not quite softening, but acknowledging her presence in a way that felt different. "You're still here," she said, pulling her robe tighter around herself. She hadn't expected to see him. It was barely 7 in the morning. "I had a late night. Early meeting got canceled." He set down his phone. "There's coffee." Lila poured herself a cup, hyper-aware of him watching her every movement. The silence stretched between them, not quite comfortable, but not as hostile as it had been. "How's your mother?" Adrian asked. The question surprised her. He never asked about Caroline beyond the initial logistics. "Better. They're talking about reducing the treatment frequency if the next scans look good." "That's good news." "Yes." Lila took a sip of coffee, burning her tongue slightly. "She keeps asking about you." Adrian's eyebrow lifted. "What does she ask?" "If you're treating me well. If I'm happy." Lila laughed, a bitter sound. "I keep lying to her." "Are you lying?" She looked at him over the rim of her cup. "Am I being treated well?" "Sure. I live in a palace. I wear clothes that cost more than cars. I eat food I can't even pronounce. Am I happy? What do you think?" Adrian was quiet for a moment, his fingers drumming against the counter. Happiness wasn't part of the contract. "No, it wasn't." Lila set down her cup. "I'm going to visit her today. I'll probably be gone most of the afternoon." "Take Marcus with you." Marcus was the driver, a silent man built like a tank who seemed to materialize whenever she needed to go somewhere. "I don't need a babysitter." "You need security." "Why? Who's going to bother me?" Adrian's expression darkened. "You're my wife now. That makes you a target. Marcus goes with you, or you don't go at all." Lila's hands clenched. "You can't keep me prisoner here." "I'm keeping you safe. There's a difference." "Is there?" She pushed away from the counter. "You control where I go, who I see, what I wear. You've locked me in a golden cage and you're surprised I'm not singing." "I never asked you to sing." Adrian said, his voice low and dangerous. I asked you to play a role. You agreed to the terms. I agreed because I didn't have a choice. You had a choice. You could have walked away. And let my mother die? That's not a choice, Adrian. That's coercion. He moved closer, and Lila felt her back hit the counter. Adrian stopped a foot away, close enough that she could see the flecks of amber in his dark eyes, close enough to smell that expensive cologne that probably cost more than her old monthly rent. You think I coerced you? His voice was soft, almost a whisper. You think I forced this? Didn't you? I made an offer. You accepted it. I've kept every promise I made to you. Your mother is receiving the best care available. You have everything you could need. I've given you space, privacy, freedom within reasonable bounds. What more do you want from me? Lila's breath came fast and shallow. I want you to admit that this is wrong, that you bought me, that you're keeping me here like some kind of possession. Adrian's jaw tightened. You want me to feel guilty? Yes. I don't. He leaned in slightly, and Lila's heart hammered against her ribs. I wanted you, so I found a way to have you. That's how my world works. I don't apologize for it. The admission hung between them, shocking in its honesty. Lila stared at him, her mind racing. You wanted me? You didn't even know me. I knew enough. Adrian's hand came up, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel the heat of it near her face. I watched you for months, remember? I saw how you fought for your mother, how you worked yourself to exhaustion, how you never complained or gave up. I saw your strength, your loyalty, your fire. And I wanted all of it for myself. That's not wanting someone. That's obsession. Maybe it is. He didn't deny it, didn't look away. But it's honest. Can you say the same? I hate you, Lila whispered. I know. Adrian pulled back, the moment breaking like a snapped wire. Marcus will be ready when you are. He walked out of the kitchen, leaving Lila trembling and furious and confused by the heat that had nothing to do with anger pooling low in her stomach. She hated him. She did. But her body apparently hadn't gotten the message. The visit with her mother should have been a relief. A break from the constant tension of the penthouse. But Caroline was sharper than she'd been in weeks, the treatment giving her back some of the clarity the pain had stolen. You look tired, baby, she said, reaching for Lila's hand. Are you sleeping? I'm fine, Mom. That's not what I asked. Caroline studied her daughter's face with a mother's practiced eye. What's wrong? Everything, Lila wanted to say. I sold myself to a criminal, and I don't know if I can survive 3 years of this. Instead, she smiled and lied. Nothing's wrong. I'm just adjusting. To what? Being rich? Caroline's tone was gentle but probing. Or to being married to a stranger? Lila looked down at their joined hands. Both, I guess. Tell me about him, your husband. What's he really like? What was Adrian really like? Lila didn't know how to answer that. He was cold and controlling, but he'd kept every promise. He was ruthless, but he'd never raised his voice to her, never touched her without permission. He watched her with an intensity that should have terrified her, but sometimes, in brief moments, she saw something else underneath. Loneliness, maybe, or hunger for something he couldn't name. He's complicated, Lila said finally. Men usually are. Caroline squeezed her hand. But is he good to you? He keeps his word. He doesn't hurt me. He gives me space. That's not the same as being good to you. I know. Lila blinked back tears. But it's enough. It has to be. Caroline pulled her daughter into a hug, and Lila let herself be held, breathing in the familiar scent of her mother's lavender lotion mixed with hospital antiseptic. I'm getting better because of you, Caroline whispered. Because you were brave enough to do whatever it took. Don't think I don't know that. Mom, but promise me something. Promise me you won't lose yourself in this. Whatever arrangement you've made, whatever you're doing, don't forget who you are. Lila pulled back, wiping her eyes. I promise. It was another lie. She was already forgetting, already feeling herself dissolve into the role of Mrs. Adrian Moretti, The perfect wife who smiled at the right times and never asked questions, and pretended she didn't notice the men with guns who sometimes appeared in the penthouse late at night. Marcus drove her back in silence, the city passing by in a blur of lights and movement. When they pulled up to the building, Lila saw Adrian standing outside, talking to two men in dark suits. His body language was tense, aggressive. One of the men said something, and Adrian's hand shot out, grabbing him by the collar and slamming him against the building wall. "Stay in the car, Marcus said, his voice sharp. But Lila was already opening the door, some instinct pulling her out onto the sidewalk. Adrian's head snapped toward her, his eyes blazing with fury that faded the moment he saw her face. He released the man, straightened his jacket, and walked toward her like nothing had happened. "Go inside." "What's going on?" "Nothing that concerns you. Go inside, Lila." "Those men. Inside. Now." His tone left no room for argument. Marcus appeared at her elbow, gently but firmly guiding her toward the building entrance. Lila looked back once and saw Adrian talking to the men again, his posture radiating violence barely held in check. She didn't see him again until late that night. She was in bed reading a book she couldn't focus on when her door opened without a knock. Adrian stood in the doorway, and Lila's breath caught. His shirt was torn, blood on the collar. His knuckles were split and bruising. There was a cut above his eyebrow, already starting to swell. "What happened to you?" Lila sat up, the book forgotten. "Nothing." Adrian's voice was flat, emotionless. "That's not nothing. You're bleeding." "It's handled." "Adrian, I don't want to talk about it." He started to turn away, then stopped. "I just wanted to make sure you were all right, that you got home safely." The admission seemed to cost him something. Lila stared at him, this dangerous man who'd bought her like property, but who checked on her safety with blood on his hands. "I'm fine," she said quietly. "But you're not. You should clean those cuts." "I will. Let me help." Adrian's eyes met hers, surprised. "Why would you want to do that?" Lila didn't have a good answer. She should want him to bleed, to hurt. But looking at him standing there, trying to pretend he wasn't injured, trying to maintain that impenetrable facade, she couldn't do it. "Because despite everything, you're still a person," she said. "And you're bleeding on my doorframe." Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. "Can't have that." "No." Lila threw back the covers and stood up, suddenly aware she was only wearing a thin nightgown. Adrian's gaze tracked the movement, his eyes darkening, but he didn't move. "Bathroom. Sit." To her surprise, he obeyed. The bathroom was absurdly large, all marble and chrome and luxury. Lila pulled out the first aid kit she'd found weeks ago and made Adrian sit on the closed toilet lid. Up close, the damage looked worse. The cut above his eyebrow was deep, the blood still trickling down the side of his face. "This might need stitches," she said, dampening a clean cloth. "It's fine." "It's not fine. Hold still." She pressed the cloth to the cut, and Adrian hissed through his teeth. "Sorry. I've had worse." "That doesn't make it better." Lila cleaned the wound carefully, hyper-aware of how close she was standing, how Adrian's knees bracketed her legs, how he was looking up at her with an expression she couldn't read. "What happened tonight?" "Business disagreement." "You beat someone up over business?" "I didn't beat anyone up. I had a conversation that got physical." "There's blood on your shirt, Adrian. Not mine." His hand came up to rest on her hip, light and tentative. "Mostly not mine." Lila should have stepped back, should have pushed his hand away. Instead, she found herself leaning closer, tilting his head to get a better look at the cut. "You're going to have a scar. Add it to the collection." She moved to his hands, cleaning the split knuckles with gentle touches that made his breath catch. His hands were strong, scarred from old wounds, the hands of someone who'd fought his whole life. She turned one over, tracing the lines on his palm without thinking. "Lila," Adrian's voice was rough, strained. She looked up and found him watching her with naked hunger, all his careful control stripped away. The air between them felt electric, dangerous. "I should go," she whispered, but she didn't move. Adrian's hand tightened on her hip, pulling her fractionally closer. "You should." Neither of them moved. Lila's heart pounded so hard she was sure he could hear it. This was wrong. He'd bought her. He'd trapped her. She hated him. But she was leaning in anyway, drawn by something she didn't want to name. Adrian's other hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing over her cheekbone with surprising gentleness. "If you don't leave now," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I'm going to kiss you. And it won't be like at the wedding." Lila's breath shuddered out. "Adrian? Go, Lila." It sounded like it cost him everything to say it. "Please." The please broke her paralysis. She stepped back, Adrian's hands falling away, and nearly ran out of the bathroom. Behind her, she heard him curse softly in Italian, the words harsh and beautiful and full of frustration. Back in bed, Lila pressed her hands to her flaming cheeks and tried to understand what the hell had just happened. She'd almost kissed him, almost let him kiss her, almost wanted it. This was worse than hating him. This was dangerous. The next morning, Adrian was gone before she woke up, but there was a note on the kitchen counter in sharp, precise handwriting. "Thank you for last night. The cuts are fine. A." Lila crumpled the note and threw it away, trying to ignore the way her hands trembled. The days that followed were strange. Adrian didn't avoid her exactly, but he kept more distance, maintaining a careful politeness that felt like armor. They attended another function together, and his hand at her back felt different now. She was aware of every point of contact, every casual touch that made her skin burn. At a business dinner, she caught him staring at her across the table, his eyes dark and intent. When their gazes met, he didn't look away. Neither did she. This was a problem, a serious problem. Lila tried to focus on her mother's recovery, on the good news from the doctors, on anything except the growing awareness of Adrian that followed her through every room of the penthouse. She started avoiding him, taking her meals in her room, leaving early for visits with Caroline, and coming back late. If Adrian noticed, he didn't comment. Then came the morning she woke up feeling wrong. Her stomach churned, her head pounded, and when she tried to stand, the room spun violently. She made it to the bathroom just in time to be sick, her whole body shaking with the effort. When she finally stopped retching, she found Adrian standing in the doorway, his face creased with concern. "How long have you been there?" she asked weakly. "Long enough." He grabbed a towel, dampening it with cold water, and crouched beside her. "How long have you been feeling sick?" "Just this morning. I'm fine, just something I ate." "You barely eat anything." Adrian pressed the towel to her forehead. "Have you been sleeping?" "Some." "Lila." She closed her eyes. "Not really. Maybe an hour or two a night." Adrian cursed. "Why didn't you say something?" "Because it's not your problem. You're my wife. That makes it my problem." He helped her stand, supporting most of her weight. "You're seeing a doctor. I don't need—" "Not negotiable." Adrian guided her back to bed, his touch surprisingly gentle. "I'm calling my personal physician. She'll be here within the hour." Lila wanted to argue, but another wave of nausea hit her, and she had to concentrate on not being sick again. Adrian stayed with her, holding her hair back when she couldn't make it stop, wiping her face with the cool towel, murmuring things in Italian that she didn't understand but found oddly comforting. When Dr. Chen arrived, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who radiated competence, Adrian reluctantly left the room. The doctor performed a thorough examination, asked a dozen questions, and then sat back with an expression Lila couldn't read. "When was your last period?" Dr. Chen asked. Lila's mind went blank. I don't know. A while ago? 6 weeks? Maybe 8? I haven't been tracking it. Have you been under significant stress recently?" "You could say that." "Doctor." Chen pulled out a small kit from her bag. "I'd like to run a quick test, just to rule something out." "What kind of test?" The doctor handed her a pregnancy test, and Lila's world tilted sideways. "No," she said immediately. "That's not possible." "Have you been sexually active?" "No, we haven't. We don't." Lila's face burned. "This is a marriage of convenience. We've never—" "That wasn't part of the arrangement." Dr. Chen's expression softened slightly. "Then this will just confirm that, and we can look at other causes for your symptoms. Stress can do remarkable things to the body." Lila took the test with shaking hands and went into the bathroom. It was impossible. They'd never had sex. They'd barely touched except for that one night when she'd cleaned his wounds and that moment when they'd almost— No. This was impossible. She took the test anyway, because Dr. Chen was waiting and because she needed to prove that this was just stress or food poisoning or anything else. 3 minutes later, she stared at two pink lines and felt her entire world collapse. Dr. Chen confirmed it with a blood test drawn right there, her expression professionally neutral. You're approximately 6 to 8 weeks pregnant, Mrs. Moretti. Based on your symptoms and the timeline, I'd estimate conception occurred. Stop, Lila whispered. Just stop. But her mind was already racing backward, counting days and weeks, trying to make sense of something that made no sense at all. 6 to 8 weeks? That would have been right around the time of the wedding, maybe just before, the night before the wedding. She'd been so exhausted, so emotionally wrung out. She'd taken one of the sleeping pills the doctor had prescribed for her anxiety, the strong ones that knocked her out completely. She'd woken up the next morning feeling strange, sore in ways she couldn't explain, but she'd attributed it to stress and tension. But what if... No. 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 I need to speak to Adrian, Lila said, her voice shaking. Right now. Dr. Chen nodded and left the room. Moments later, Adrian appeared, his face tight with concern. What did she say? Are you all right? Lila looked at him, really looked at him, searching for any sign of guilt, of knowledge, of anything. I'm pregnant. Adrian froze. The color drained from his face. What? 6 to 8 weeks. The night before the wedding, or around that time. Lila stood up on shaking legs. We've never had sex, Adrian. Not while I was conscious, anyway. So you tell me how the hell I'm pregnant with your child. Lila, I swear to you, I never... He looked genuinely shocked, genuinely horrified. I would never do that. I've never touched you that way. I swear on everything I have, I didn't... Then how? Her voice broke. How am I pregnant? Adrian's mind was clearly racing, his expression shifting from shock to confusion to something darker. The sleeping pills, the night before the wedding. You took them? Yes, but how did you get them? Lila tried to remember. It felt like a lifetime ago. They were in the medicine cabinet in my bathroom here. There was a note that said they were for my anxiety, from Dr. Chen. I never asked Dr. Chen to prescribe you anything. Adrian pulled out his phone, his fingers flying over the screen. What did the pills look like? White, oval, why does it matter? Adrian's face had gone from pale to ashen. He showed her his phone screen, an image of 2 different pills. Which one? Lila pointed to the second one, and Adrian's jaw clenched so hard she heard his teeth grind. That's not a sleeping pill, he said, his voice deadly calm. That's Rohypnol, a date rape drug. The room spun. What? Someone drugged you. Someone got into the penthouse, left those pills for you, and drugged you. Adrian was already moving toward the door. Marcus, get in here now! The driver appeared within seconds, his expression alert. Sir? I need to know everyone who had access to this penthouse the week before the wedding. Everyone. Staff, delivery people, contractors, everyone. And I need the security footage from every camera, now. Marcus nodded and disappeared. Adrian turned back to Lila, and she saw rage in his eyes, the kind of fury that promised violence. Sit down, he said, his voice gentling despite the anger radiating from him. Please, before you fall down. Lila sat, her legs giving out. Someone raped me. Yes. And you didn't, it wasn't you? Adrian knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. I swear to you on everything I hold sacred, I have never touched you that way. I wanted to. I've wanted to since the first moment I saw you. But I never would have taken that choice from you. Never. She believed him. Looking into his eyes, seeing the absolute conviction there, she believed him. Which meant someone else had been in her room that night. Someone had drugged her, violated her while she was unconscious, and left her with a pregnancy she never consented to. Lila started to shake, the full horror of it hitting her in waves. Adrian pulled her into his arms, and she clung to him, this man who'd bought her freedom, but who'd never forced this particular nightmare on her. I'll find whoever did this, Adrian said against her hair, his voice a dark promise. And when I do, they'll beg for death long before I give it to them. Lila pulled away from Adrian's embrace. wiping her face with shaking hands. The tears wouldn't stop coming, and she hated herself for the weakness, hated that someone had violated her in the worst possible way, and she hadn't even known until now. "I need to see the footage," she said, her voice raw. "I need to know who did this." Adrian's expression was carved from stone. "You don't need to see that." "Yes, I do." Lila stood up, swaying slightly. "This is my body, my life. I have a right to know." "Lila, don't protect me from this, Adrian. I'm already living it." She looked down at her stomach, still flat, showing no signs of the life growing inside. A baby. She was carrying a baby conceived through rape, and she hadn't even known she'd been raped until 10 minutes ago. "I need to know." Adrian studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, but I'm staying with you." Marcus returned with the laptop, his face grim. "I've pulled all the footage from the week before the wedding. There's something you need to see." They sat together on the couch, Lila in the middle with Adrian on one side and Marcus on the other. The driver pulled up multiple video feeds, scanning through hours of footage at high speed until he found what he was looking for. "There," Marcus said, pausing on a frame. 2 nights before the wedding, 3:17 a.m. The camera showed the hallway outside Lila's bedroom. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then a figure appeared, male, average height, dressed in dark clothing with a hood pulled up. He moved with purpose, clearly knowing where the cameras were positioned, keeping his face hidden. "Who is that?" Lila asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Keep watching," Marcus said. The figure stopped outside her door, pulled out what looked like a key card, and let himself in. He was inside for 43 minutes. When he emerged, his hood had slipped slightly, and for just a fraction of a second, the camera caught part of his profile. Adrian leaned forward, his whole body tensing. "Run facial recognition. Now." Marcus's fingers flew over the keyboard. The program ran for less than a minute before a match appeared on screen, along with a name and file. "Dominic Santoro," Marcus read. "One of your father's old lieutenants. Disappeared after the old man died, presumed to have fled to Europe." "Not Europe," Adrian said, his voice colder than Lila had ever heard it. "He's been here the whole time, working for someone. Waiting." "Working for who?" Lila asked. Adrian didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the screen, on the face of the man who'd violated her, and Lila saw something in his expression that terrified her. Not anger, but calculation. Cold, precise, murderous calculation. "Marcus, I need everything on Santoro, every known associate, every property he's ever been linked to, every person who might know where he is, and I need it within the hour." Adrian stood, his movements controlled but violent in their precision. "Call the family heads. Tell them I'm invoking privilege. Anyone who's seen Santoro or knows his location reports to me within 24 hours, or they're considered hostile. Sir, if you invoke privilege, they'll know something serious happened. They'll ask questions." "Let them ask." Adrian's voice was deadly soft. "Anyone who gets in my way becomes an enemy. Make that very clear." Marcus nodded and left. Adrian turned to Lila, and his expression shifted, the rage banking itself behind concern. "Dr. Chen is still here. You should talk to her about options." "Options?" Lila's mind felt sluggish, unable to keep up. "For the pregnancy." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Given the circumstances, you have choices. No one would question whatever you decide." Lila's hand moved unconsciously to her stomach. Choices. He meant abortion, and legally, medically, emotionally, she had every right. This pregnancy was the result of rape. She hadn't consented to any of it, but the baby hadn't done anything wrong. "I need time to think," she said. "Of course. Take all the time you need." Adrian hesitated, then added, "Whatever you decide, I'll support it, and I'll make sure you have the best care available." "Why?" The question came out sharper than she intended. "Why do you care? This doesn't affect you. The baby isn't yours." Something flickered in Adrian's eyes, pain maybe, or longing. "No, it's not. But you're my wife, and someone violated you under my roof, under my protection. That makes it my responsibility." "Your responsibility," Lila repeated. "That's all I am to you, isn't it? Another obligation? No. The word was fierce, immediate. You're... He stopped, seeming to struggle with something. You're more than that. You've been more than that for a while now. Lila stared at him. What does that mean? Adrian looked away, his jaw working. It means I care what happens to you. It means the thought of someone hurting you makes me want to burn the world down. It means this stopped being just an arrangement weeks ago, at least for me. The admission hung between them, vulnerable and dangerous. Lila didn't know what to do with it, didn't know how to reconcile this confession with everything else. The contract, the control, the way he'd bought her like property. I don't know what you want me to say, she whispered. I don't want you to say anything. I just needed you to know. Adrian moved toward the door. Dr. Chen is in the study. Talk to her. I'll be in my office making calls. He left, and Lila sat alone with the knowledge that her life had just shattered in a completely new way. Dr. Chen was professional and compassionate, laying out all of Lila's options with clinical precision while still acknowledging the emotional weight of the decision. Abortion was absolutely an option, and given the circumstances, there would be no judgment. Adoption was another path, or she could choose to continue the pregnancy and raise the child. There's no right answer, Dr. Chen said gently. Only what's right for you. Lila thought about her mother, who'd raised her alone after Lila's father died. Caroline had been barely 22, pregnant and widowed, with nothing but determination and love to see her through. She'd never once made Lila feel like a burden, never suggested she regretted her choice to keep her baby despite the circumstances. But this was different. This was rape. This was trauma. Can I have some time, Sul? Lila asked, before I decide? Of course, but given that you're already 6 to 8 weeks along, if you're considering termination, sooner is better than later, both medically and emotionally. Dr. Chen paused. And regardless of what you decide, I'd strongly recommend therapy. What happened to you is a significant trauma, and you shouldn't process it alone. Lila nodded numbly. Therapy, options, decisions, everything felt surreal, like she was watching someone else's life implode from a distance. After Dr. Chen left, Lila stayed in the study, staring at nothing. She didn't know how long she sat there before Marcus appeared in the doorway. Mrs. Moretti, he said, his voice unusually gentle. There's someone here who wants to see you. I told her it wasn't a good time, but she's insisting. Who? Your mother. She said you called her earlier and she could tell something was wrong. She checked herself out of the medical center against doctor's orders and took a cab here. Lila's throat tightened. She'd called Caroline right after finding out about the pregnancy, before the full horror of the situation had set in. She'd said something vague about not feeling well, and apparently her mother had heard everything she hadn't said. Send her in, Lila said. Caroline appeared moments later, still wearing her hospital bracelet, leaning heavily on a cane but with fire in her eyes. What happened? And don't you dare lie to me. Lila tried to hold it together. She really did. But seeing her mother, weak but fierce, willing to risk her own recovery to be there, it broke something inside her. The whole story came pouring out in gasps and tears, and Caroline held her through it all, murmuring the same soothing sounds she'd used when Lila was a child with nightmares. When Lila finally went quiet, exhausted from crying, Caroline pulled back and cupped her daughter's face in both hands. Listen to me, she said, her voice steady. What happened to you is evil, unforgivable, but you are not broken. You are not ruined, and whatever you decide about this pregnancy, I will stand beside you. No judgment, no pressure, just love. I don't know what to do, Lila whispered. You don't have to know right now. You just have to breathe. Caroline smoothed Lila's hair back. But I do need to ask you something. This man you married, Adrian, do you trust him? Lila thought about that. Did she trust Adrian? He'd bought her, trapped her, controlled her life, but he'd also kept every promise, protected her in his own twisted way, and looked genuinely devastated by what had happened to her. I think so, she said. I didn't, but I'm starting to. Then let him help you. Let him find the man who did this, and in the meantime, you take care of yourself. Caroline kissed her forehead. One day at a time, baby. That's all any of us can do. Adrian appeared in the doorway, and Lila saw him take in the scene, her tear-stained face, her mother's protective stance. His expression was carefully neutral, but something in his eyes looked almost envious, like he was watching something he'd never had and didn't know how to ask for. "Mrs. Hart," he said quietly, "you shouldn't have left the medical center. Let me have Marcus drive you back." "I'm not going anywhere until I know my daughter is all right," Caroline said, with the kind of stubborn strength that Lila had inherited. "Then stay, both of you." Adrian glanced at Lila. "I've had the guest suite prepared. It's on the same floor, just down the hall. You can be close to Lila without having to go back to the hospital tonight." Caroline studied him with a mother's shrewd gaze. "That's generous of you." "It's practical. You need rest, and Lila needs support. This accomplishes both." Adrian turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, Mrs. Hart, your daughter is the strongest person I've ever met. She'll get through this, and I'll make sure she has everything she needs to do it." After he left, Caroline raised an eyebrow at Lila. "He's in love with you." "No, he's not. He barely knows me." "Baby, I've been married. I know what a man in love looks like, even when he's trying to hide it." Caroline settled back on the couch, wincing slightly. "The question is, how do you feel about him?" Lila didn't have an answer for that. Her feelings about Adrian were a tangled mess of resentment and attraction, anger, and something that might have been the beginning of affection. He'd forced her into this marriage, but he'd also given her back her mother. He controlled her life, but he'd never touched her without permission. He was a criminal, but he'd promised to find and destroy the man who'd violated her. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I hate what he did, bringing me here. But I don't hate him. Not anymore." "That's a start," Caroline said. "Sometimes that's all you need." They stayed up late talking, Caroline offering the kind of unconditional support that only a mother could give. When Lila finally went to bed, exhausted and emotionally wrung out, she felt fractionally more stable than she had that morning. She woke sometime in the middle of the night to the sound of voices, low, angry voices coming from somewhere in the penthouse. Lila got up and crept down the hallway, following the sound to Adrian's office. The door was slightly ajar. Through the crack, she could see Adrian standing behind his desk, his face a mask of cold fury. 3 men stood in front of him, men Lila recognized from various functions, high-ranking members of Adrian's organization. "I don't care if it starts a war," Adrian was saying, his voice deadly calm. "Santoro violated my wife. He came into my home and hurt her. That demands blood." "With respect, boss, we don't even know who he's working for," one of the men said. "If you go after him without knowing who's backing him, you could be walking into a trap. Then I'll burn the trap to the ground, along with everyone in it." Adrian's hands were flat on the desk, his body coiled with barely contained violence. "This isn't a negotiation. Find Santoro. Bring him to me alive. And if anyone gets in your way, they become part of the problem." "What about the pregnancy?" another man asked. "If she keeps it, that's not your concern. That's between me and my wife." Adrian's eyes were black with rage. "Anyone who even mentions this outside this room will answer to me personally. Is that understood?" The men nodded and left quickly. Lila pressed herself against the wall, trying to quiet her breathing, but Adrian's voice stopped her before she could retreat. "You can come in, Lila. I know you're there." She stepped into the doorway, caught. "I didn't mean to eavesdrop." "Yes, you did. It's all right." Adrian looked exhausted, the rage draining away to leave something rawer behind. "You have a right to know what's happening." "You meant what you said. About finding him. Every word." Adrian moved around the desk, stopping a few feet from her. "He'll pay for what he did to you. I promise you that." "And what about the baby?" Lila asked quietly. "What happens if I decide to keep it?" Adrian was silent for a long moment. "Then you keep it, and I'll do everything in my power to make sure you and the child are safe and cared for." "Even though it's not yours? Even though it's the result of—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "The baby didn't choose how it was conceived. Neither did you." Adrian's voice was gentle, almost tender. "If you decide to go through with the pregnancy, I'll treat the child as mine. Legally, it already will be. But more than that, I'll give it everything I have. Protection, education, opportunities. A real father, if you'll let me. Lila's vision blurred with tears. Why would you do that? Because I care about you. Because this child will be part of you, and I want everything that's part of you. Adrian took a half step closer. Because I told you weeks ago that I wanted you, and I meant it. All of you. Everything that comes with you. Even this. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a tear from her cheek. I know I don't deserve your trust. I know I forced you into this marriage, and I can't take that back. But if you'll let me, I'd like to try to be something more than your captor. I'd like to try to be your partner, your husband, not just on paper. Lila looked up at him, this complicated, dangerous man who'd bought her freedom and was offering her something that looked almost like love. I haven't decided yet about the pregnancy. I know. And whatever you decide, I'll support you. Adrian's hand lingered on her face. But I need you to know, I'll protect you. I'll protect any child you choose to have, and I'll destroy anyone who tries to hurt you again. That's not negotiable. The intensity of the promise should have scared her. Instead, for the first time since waking up that morning, Lila felt safe. She leaned into his touch just slightly and saw something in Adrian's eyes ignite. He leaned down slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, and pressed his lips to her forehead in a kiss that felt like a vow. Go back to bed, he murmured against her skin. You need rest. Lila nodded and turned to leave, but at the doorway she looked back. Adrian? Yes? Thank you for caring, even if you shouldn't. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. I've never been good at doing what I should. Over the next week, Lila tried to process everything while the world continued to spin around her. Caroline stayed in the guest suite, recovering and providing steady support. Dr. Chen visited twice more, checking on Lila's health and gently reminding her that time was a factor in her decision. Adrian was a constant, quiet presence. He didn't push, didn't ask about her choice, but he made sure she had everything she needed. He arranged for a therapist to visit the penthouse, a kind woman named Dr. Morrison who specialized in trauma. He had meals prepared to her exact specifications when morning sickness made most food unbearable. He even canceled several business trips to stay close, something Marcus indicated was extremely unusual. Lila found herself watching him when he didn't know she was looking. She saw the way he was gentle with her mother, arranging for Caroline's medical team to visit the penthouse instead of making her travel. She saw him dismiss staff when Lila looked overwhelmed by too many people. She saw the way his hands clenched into fists whenever anyone mentioned Santoro's name, the violence he was holding back for her sake. She was starting to see past the criminal, the man who'd bought her, to the person underneath. And what she saw was complicated. Someone who'd been shaped by violence but who was capable of surprising tenderness. Someone who controlled everything around him because he'd never been able to control anything that mattered. Someone who wanted connection but didn't know how to ask for it. You're staring at him again? Caroline said one afternoon, catching Lila watching Adrian through the window as he spoke on his phone outside. I don't mean to. Yes, you do. Her mother smiled. It's all right to have complicated feelings about him, you know. You can be angry about how this started and still care about who he's becoming. Is that what you think? That he's becoming someone different? I think he's becoming who he actually is, instead of who he had to be to survive. Caroline reached over and squeezed Lila's hand, and I think you're the reason for that change. Lila wanted to argue, but she couldn't. Something had shifted between her and Adrian since the night she'd found out about the pregnancy. The careful distance had collapsed, replaced by a fragile intimacy that neither of them quite knew what to do with. That evening, there was a knock on her door. Adrian stood in the hallway, holding a folder. We found him, he said without preamble. Santoro. He's in a warehouse in the industrial district. My men have it surrounded. Lila's heart hammered. When? Now. I'm leaving in 10 minutes. Adrian's expression was hard, dangerous. I wanted you to know. And I wanted to ask if there's anything specific you want me to say to him before... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Lila thought about it thought about the man who'd violated her, who'd left her with a pregnancy she hadn't consented to, who'd stolen her choice and her dignity. She thought about all the things she wanted to scream at him, all the rage and pain and violation. "Tell him he didn't break me," she said finally. "Tell him he took something from me, but he didn't win, because I'm still here, I'm still standing, and he's nothing." Adrian's eyes blazed with something fierce and proud. "I'll tell him, right before I make him regret every breath he's ever taken." He turned to leave, but Lila caught his arm. "Adrian, wait." He turned back and she pulled him down into a kiss that was nothing like the chaste press of lips at their wedding. This was desperate and hungry and real. Months of tension and fear and unwanted attraction pouring out in a moment of connection that left them both breathless. When she pulled back, Adrian's eyes were dark with desire and something deeper, more dangerous. "Come back safe," Lila whispered. "Always," he promised, and then he was gone. Lila paced the penthouse for 2 hours, unable to sit still, unable to think about anything except Adrian walking into danger. Caroline tried to distract her, but it was useless. Every minute felt like an eternity. When the door finally opened and Adrian walked in, alive and unharmed but with blood on his clothes, Lila ran to him without thinking. He caught her, his arms coming around her tightly, and she felt him shaking slightly with adrenaline or emotion, or both. "It's done," he said against her hair. "He talked, gave us names, and now he's gone." "Did he suffer?" "Yes." Adrian pulled back enough to look at her face. "He suffered for every moment of fear you felt, every tear you cried, every nightmare you'll have. I made very sure of it." Lila should have been horrified, should have been disgusted by the violence in Adrian's voice, by the satisfaction in his eyes. Instead, she felt something dark and fierce uncurl in her chest. Justice, maybe, or vengeance, or just the simple knowledge that someone had fought for her. "Good," she said, and meant it. Adrian's expression shifted, something like relief crossing his features. "There's more. The names he gave us. Santoro was working for a rival family. The Castellanos. They wanted to use you against me, to create leverage. The pregnancy was supposed to be discovered later, after you'd started showing. They thought it would humiliate me, make me look weak. Instead, it just made you angry, furious." Adrian's hands tightened on her waist. "But their plan failed, because you're not a weakness, Lila. You're the strongest thing I have." The admission hung between them, raw and real. Lila reached up and cupped his face, her thumbs brushing over his cheekbones. "I've made a decision about the pregnancy." Adrian went very still. "All right. I'm keeping it." The words came out steady, certain. "I know it's going to be hard. I know every time I look at this child, I'll remember how it was conceived. But it's also part of me, and I won't punish it for how it came to be." "Lila, I need you to know that I'm not doing this for you. I'm not asking you to be involved or to claim a child that isn't yours. You've already done more than enough, and I won't trap you into—" Adrian kissed her, cutting off the words with a desperation that stole her breath. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers, their breath mingling. "I told you I'd treat this child as mine," he said fiercely. "I meant it, not because I have to, because I want to, because this baby is part of you, and I—" He stopped, struggling with words. "I care about you, Lila, more than I've ever cared about anyone, more than I know how to handle. If you're keeping this baby, then it's our baby, legally, emotionally, in every way that matters. I'll be its father, not the man who violated you, me." Tears streamed down Lila's face. "You mean that?" "Every word. I swear it on my life." Adrian's hands moved to cradle her face, his touch infinitely gentle. "I know I can't erase how this started. I know I bought you, trapped you, forced you into a marriage you didn't want. But if you'll give me a chance, if you'll let me try, I want to build something real with you. A real marriage, a real family, not because of contracts or obligations, but because I'm falling in love with you and I don't know how to stop." Lila's heart stuttered. "Adrian, you don't have to say it back. You don't have to feel the same way. I just needed you to know." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the tip of her nose. "I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make this right. trying to give you reasons to stay that have nothing to do with contracts or your mother's care. I'll prove to you that I can be the man you deserve." Lila pulled him into another kiss, this one slower, deeper, full of promise and possibility. When they broke apart, she was smiling through her tears. "You're already becoming him," she whispered. "The man I deserve. It's just taking me a while to see it." Adrian held her close, and for the first time since this whole nightmare began, Lila felt something that might have been hope. They stood there holding each other for a long time, neither willing to break the moment. When they finally pulled apart, Adrian kept one hand on her waist, as though afraid she might disappear if he let go completely. "You should clean up," Lila said, gesturing to the blood on his shirt. "And probably burn those clothes." "Probably." Adrian glanced down at himself, seeming to notice the mess for the first time. "I came straight here. I needed to see you first." The admission made her chest tighten. "Go shower. I'll make sure Caroline knows I'm all right. She's probably worried sick." But when Lila went to check on her mother, she found Caroline already asleep in the guest suite, a book open on her chest and the television playing quietly. Lila pulled a blanket over her and turned off the TV, pressing a kiss to her mother's forehead before leaving. She was heading back to her own room when she passed Adrian's bedroom. The door was open, and she could hear the shower running. Without really thinking about it, Lila stopped in the doorway. She'd never been in his room before. It was surprisingly sparse for someone with his wealth. A large bed with plain dark bedding, minimal furniture, no personal touches except for a single photograph on the nightstand. Lila moved closer and picked it up, studying the image of a much younger Adrian standing beside a woman who had to be his mother. They both looked solemn, uncomfortable, like they didn't know how to smile for the camera. "That was taken 3 weeks before she died," Adrian's voice came from behind her. Lila turned to find him standing in the bathroom doorway, a towel wrapped around his waist and water still dripping from his hair. Her mouth went dry at the sight of him, bare-chested, scarred, powerful. "I'm sorry," she managed. "I didn't mean to intrude." "You're not intruding. This is your home, too." Adrian moved to his dresser, pulling out clothes. "My mother was a good woman trapped in a bad marriage. My father was, well, he was what he was, a monster who built an empire on violence and fear. Is that why you took over when he died? To be different from him?" Adrian pulled on a pair of dark pants, then a simple t-shirt. "I took over because I didn't want someone worse to fill the vacuum. And yes, because I wanted to prove I could do it better. Less violence, more legitimate business. But that's harder than it sounds when everyone around you only understands one language." Lila set down the photograph carefully. "The blood on your shirt tonight, that was that language. Yes, and I won't apologize for it. Santoro deserved worse than what he got." Adrian's expression was hard, unapologetic. "I know what I am, Lila. I know the things I've done. I'm trying to be better, but I'll never be good. Not in the way normal people are. I'm not asking you to be good." Lila took a step closer to him. "I'm asking you to be honest, with me, about everything." Adrian studied her face, and she saw the exact moment he made a decision. "All right, what do you want to know?" "Everything. Your business, your enemies, why you really married me. All of it." He was quiet for a long moment, then gestured to the bed. "Sit. This is going to take a while." They sat together, not touching but close, and Adrian told her things he'd never told anyone. About growing up in a household where violence was currency and love was weakness. About watching his father beat his mother and being too small to stop it. About the first time he killed someone at 17, defending himself from one of his father's rivals, and how it had changed something fundamental inside him. "I inherited an empire built on suffering," Adrian said, his voice low. "Drug trafficking, weapons, prostitution, protection rackets. My father didn't care who got hurt as long as money kept flowing. When he died 5 years ago, I had a choice. Dismantle everything and let vultures tear it apart, or take control and try to change it from within. So you took control. I took control. And I've been slowly pivoting ever since, shutting down the worst operations, investing in legitimate businesses, trying to clean the money without getting killed for it. But it's slow. There are people in my organization who resist change. People outside who see any weakness as an opportunity. The Castellanos are one of several families who'd love to take me down. Lila absorbed this, trying to reconcile the man beside her with the criminal empire he described. And me? Where do I fit into all this? Adrian's hand found hers, his fingers threading through hers with surprising gentleness. 6 months ago, I went to that diner you worked at. I was meeting someone there, and you were my server. You were so tired you could barely stand, but you smiled anyway. You were kind to this old man at the counter who couldn't afford his meal. I saw you pay for it yourself when you thought no one was looking, and I was captivated. That's why you had me followed. Yes, I wanted to know everything about you. The more I learned, the more I wanted you. Adrian's grip on her hand tightened. But I also knew you'd never choose me freely, not someone like me. So I looked for leverage, and I found your mother's illness. I know that makes me a bastard. I know I manipulated you into this marriage, but I can't regret it because it brought you here. Lila should have been angry, should have pulled away, should have condemned him for the calculated manipulation. But she was tired of anger, tired of fighting the complicated feelings she had for this man who'd trapped her, but who looked at her like she was something precious. I should hate you for that, she said quietly. I know, but I don't, not anymore. Lila turned to face him fully. I'm angry about how this started. I probably always will be. But I'm also grateful that my mother is alive. And I'm starting to think that maybe we can build something real out of this mess. Adrian lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. I'll spend every day trying to deserve that chance. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, just holding hands, until Lila yawned and Adrian insisted she needed sleep. He walked her to her room, stopping at the doorway. Will you think about something? He asked. What? Moving into my room, not for sex or anything like that, just to be closer, so I can make sure you're all right, especially with the pregnancy. Adrian looked almost vulnerable, uncertain in a way she'd never seen him. But if you're not ready, I understand. Lila considered it. The thought of sleeping in the same bed as Adrian should have terrified her. Instead, it felt oddly right. Safe. Give me a few days, let me get used to the idea. Of course. He kissed her forehead softly. Good night, Lila. Good night. Over the next week, Lila felt the world shift again. The morning sickness got worse, leaving her exhausted and irritable. Adrian was patient through all of it, holding her hair when she was sick, bringing her crackers and ginger tea, never complaining when she snapped at him for no reason. Caroline was improving steadily, her scans showing remarkable progress. The doctors were cautiously optimistic about remission, and Lila watched her mother grow stronger each day with a gratitude that sometimes overwhelmed her. Then came the day Marcus appeared with a grim expression and news that made Lila's blood run cold. We have a problem, he told Adrian, with Lila standing right there. The Castellanos are pushing back. They've been spreading rumors about Mrs. Moretti, about the pregnancy, saying it proves you're weak, that you can't control your own house. Adrian's expression went dark. Let them talk. It's more than talk, boss. They're making moves. 2 of our legitimate businesses were hit last night. Vandalism, threats to employees. They're testing you, seeing if you'll respond. Of course I'll respond. Adrian's voice was deadly calm. Set up a meeting, neutral ground. I'll remind the Castellanos what happens when they come after what's mine. Lila grabbed his arm. That sounds like a trap. Probably is. Adrian covered her hand with his. But I can't let them think they can target you without consequences. If I don't respond, others will see it as permission to do the same. Then take more security. Take everyone you need. I will. He turned to face her fully. But I need you to promise me something. While I'm gone, you stay in the penthouse. No leaving, no matter what. Marcus and half my security team will be here with you. Adrian, I don't need... Promise me, Lila. Please. There was real fear in his eyes, carefully controlled but visible. I can't focus on the Castellanos if I'm worried about you. Lila nodded reluctantly. I promise. But you promise me you'll come back. Always. Adrian pulled her close, kissing her deeply. I have too much to live for now to be careless. He left an hour later with 6 armed men, and Lila tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. Caroline kept her company, sensing her anxiety and trying to distract her with stories from Lila's childhood. But Lila couldn't focus, couldn't think about anything except Adrian walking into danger. The hours crawled by. Lunch turned into dinner, and still no word. Lila's phone stayed silent. Marcus wouldn't tell her anything except that everything was proceeding as planned, which told her exactly nothing. Then, just after 9 at night, Marcus's phone rang. He answered, listened, and his expression went carefully blank. "What?" Lila demanded. "What happened?" "There's been an incident. I need you to stay calm, Mrs. Moretti." Lila's heart stopped. "Is Adrian hurt?" "He's alive, but the meeting went bad. There was gunfire. He's been shot." The world tilted sideways. Lila grabbed the counter to keep from falling. "How bad?" "I don't know yet. They're taking him to a private facility we use for situations like this. I'm taking you there now." "I promised I wouldn't leave. That promise is void if he's injured. Get your mother and let's go." The drive to the facility was the longest 20 minutes of Lila's life. Caroline held her hand the whole way, murmuring reassurances that Lila couldn't process. All she could think about was Adrian bleeding, dying, leaving her alone with this fragile new thing they'd been building together. The facility looked like a regular medical building from the outside, but inside it was clearly set up for treating injuries that couldn't be taken to normal hospitals. A doctor met them at the door, his scrubs already blood-stained. "Mrs. Moretti," he said, "your husband is in surgery. The bullet hit his shoulder, missed anything vital. He lost a lot of blood, but he's stable. We're removing the bullet now." "Can I see him?" "Not until he's out of surgery, but I can take you to the waiting area where his men are." Lila followed the doctor through sterile hallways to a private waiting room where 6 men sat in various states of injury. One had a bandaged arm, another a split lip. All of them looked shaken. They stood when Lila entered, showing respect or deference or both. "What happened?" she asked. The man with the bandaged arm, she thought his name was Vincent, spoke up. "The Castellanos brought twice the agreed number of men. When the boss called them on it, things got heated. Someone fired first. We still don't know who. It turned into a bloodbath. We got the boss out, but not before he took a bullet." "How many dead?" 3 of theirs, none of ours, though a few are pretty banged up." Vincent gestured to himself ruefully. "Boss made sure we all got out. Even took a bullet, keeping one of the younger guys from getting shot in the head. Of course he did. Adrian would protect his people even at risk to himself. It was part of who he was, that fierce loyalty buried under layers of control and violence." Lila sat down to wait, and the minutes felt like hours. Caroline sat beside her, offering quiet support. The men talked in low voices about retaliation, about the Castellanos declaring open war, about what this meant for the organization. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the doctor emerged. "He's out of surgery, stable. The bullet came out clean, no permanent damage. He'll need rest and physical therapy, but he should make a full recovery." "Can I see him?" "He's still unconscious from the anesthesia, but yes, follow me." Adrian looked vulnerable in the hospital bed, pale and still in a way Lila had never seen him. Monitors beeped softly, tracking his vitals. His shoulder was heavily bandaged, and there were various IVs running into his arm. Lila pulled a chair close to the bed and took his hand carefully, avoiding the IV. "You idiot," she whispered. "You promised you'd come back." Adrian's eyes flickered open at the sound of her voice, unfocused and hazy with drugs. "Lila? I'm here. I'm right here." "Good." His hand squeezed hers weakly. "Baby okay?" The fact that his first question was about the pregnancy made her throat tight. "Yes. We're both fine. You're the one who got shot." "Worth it. Got you back." Adrian's words were slurred, the drugs making him loose and honest. "Love you. Should have said it before. Love you so much." Lila's vision blurred with tears. "You're high on painkillers. You don't know what you're saying." "No, exactly. Been wanting to say it for weeks." His eyes tried to focus on her face. "You're so beautiful. Did I ever tell you that? You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Adrian, marry me again, for real this time. Big wedding, your choice, whatever you want. He was definitely high, the words tumbling out without his usual careful control. Want to do it right. Want to deserve you. Lila laughed through her tears, pressing a kiss to his knuckles. We're already married, you idiot. But you didn't choose it. I want you to choose me. Choose us. His eyes started to drift closed again. Promise you'll think about it? I promise. Now sleep. You need to heal. 'Kay, but you'll stay? I'll stay. Adrian smiled, already falling back into drugged sleep. Love you, Lila Hart Moretti. Lila sat there holding his hand, watching him breathe, and felt something crack open in her chest. She'd been so focused on resenting how this marriage started that she'd been fighting against what it was becoming. But looking at Adrian now, vulnerable and honest in his drug-induced haze, she couldn't deny it anymore. She was falling in love with her husband. The realization should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like relief. Caroline appeared in the doorway, leaning on her cane. How is he? High as a kite and saying things he probably wouldn't say sober. Lila wiped her eyes. But he's going to be okay. And how are you? Lila looked at her mother, then back at Adrian. I think I'm going to be okay too. Eventually. Caroline smiled. Good. Because that man loves you desperately, drugs or no drugs. And unless I'm very wrong, you love him back. Lila didn't deny it. She couldn't, not anymore. Adrian was transferred back to the penthouse 2 days later, grumpy and in pain despite the medication. He'd tried to refuse bed rest, insisting he needed to deal with the Castellano situation, but his doctor had been firm. 2 weeks minimum recovery before he could even think about returning to normal activities. Lila appointed herself his keeper, making sure he took his medication, changed his bandages, and actually rested instead of working from his laptop in bed. Adrian was a terrible patient, restless and irritable, but he submitted to her care with surprising grace. You don't have to do this, he said one afternoon as she helped him change his shirt. The movement pulled at his stitches, making him wince. I know. I want to. Lila carefully eased the clean shirt over his injured shoulder. Besides, you took care of me when I was sick. This is just returning the favor. That was different. You were pregnant and dealing with trauma. I just got shot because I was stupid enough to walk into an ambiguous situation. You got shot protecting your people. There's a difference. Lila finished with the shirt and sat down on the edge of the bed. The men told me what happened, how you pushed one of them out of the way. Adrian shrugged, then immediately regretted it, pain flashing across his face. He's 23 and has a wife and baby at home. I wasn't going to let him die for my pride. See, that's what people don't understand about you. You act like you're this cold, ruthless criminal, but you'd take a bullet for a kid you barely know. Don't romanticize it, Lila. I've done terrible things. The fact that I occasionally do something decent doesn't erase that. I'm not trying to erase it. I'm trying to understand all of you, the good and the bad. Lila reached for his hand. You told me you loved me when you were high on painkillers. Adrian went very still. I remember, vaguely. I also remember proposing we get married again, which was definitely the drugs talking since we're already married. Was it, though? The drugs talking? Lila watched his face carefully. Or were you just saying things you normally keep locked down? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. What do you want me to say? The truth. Do you love me? He looked at her with those dark, intense eyes that had haunted her since the first day they met. Yes. I love you. I've loved you since before I had any right to. Since before you even knew my name. I'm in love with you, Lila, and I know that's probably unfair given how this started, but it's the truth. Lila's heart raced. And the proposal, getting married again? I meant that too. I know we're legally married, but it happened in a judge's office with 2 strangers as witnesses because I gave you no choice. If you'd let me, I'd like to do it again. Properly this time. With your mother there. And friends if you want them, and you in a dress you actually chose instead of one I picked out. I want you to walk toward me because you want to, not because you're trapped. Lila blinked back tears. You really mean all of that? Every word. Adrian's hand tightened on hers. I know I don't deserve a second chance. I know what I did was wrong. But if you're willing to give me one anyway, I swear I'll spend the rest of my life making it right. She leaned forward and kissed him, careful not to jostle his injured shoulder. It was different from their previous kisses, slower, deeper, full of promises neither of them had been ready to make before. When they pulled apart, Adrian was looking at her with wonder and hope and fear, all tangled together. What does that mean? It means I'm falling in love with you too, Lila admitted. I've been fighting it because I was so angry about how this started, but I can't fight it anymore, and I don't want to. Adrian pulled her closer with his good arm, pressing his forehead to hers. Say it again. I'm falling in love with you, Adrian Moretti, with all your scars and secrets and terrible decisions, with everything you are and everything you're trying to become. You're going to marry me again, aren't you? Adrian's voice was rough with emotion. Really marry me this time. Lila smiled through her tears. Yes, when you're healed, and when the baby is born, and when things are calmer, I'll marry you again. For real. I'm going to make it perfect, everything you deserve. I don't need perfect, I just need honest. Lila kissed him again, soft and sweet. I need you to be exactly who you are. That's enough. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other carefully, building something fragile and new from the wreckage of how they'd started. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange kind of domestic peace. Adrian recovered steadily, gradually regaining his strength. Lila's morning sickness eased into the second trimester, replaced by a growing belly that was just starting to show. Caroline continued to improve, the doctors now using the word remission with real confidence. And slowly, carefully, Lila and Adrian learned how to be married for real instead of on paper. It wasn't perfect. They argued about his overprotectiveness, about her stubbornness, about his tendency to make decisions without consulting her. But they also laughed together, talked late into the night, learned each other's habits and quirks and hidden vulnerabilities. Lila finally moved into Adrian's room, and they learned how to share space, how to sleep curled together, how to wake up tangled in each other's limbs, how to be intimate in ways that had nothing to do with sex and everything to do with trust. Tell me something you've never told anyone, Lila said one night, lying in the dark with her head on Adrian's chest, listening to his heartbeat. Like what? Anything. Something real. Adrian was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then softly, I'm terrified of being like my father. Every decision I make, every time I use violence to solve a problem, I wonder if I'm just becoming him. If all this effort to be different is just a lie I tell myself. Lila tilted her head to look at him in the darkness. You're not him. You're nothing like him. How do you know? You never met him. Because your father never would have questioned whether he was a good man. He wouldn't have cared. You do. That's the difference. Lila pressed a kiss over his heart. You're not perfect, Adrian, but you're trying. That counts for something. His arm tightened around her. Your turn. Tell me something you've never told anyone. Lila thought about it. Sometimes I'm angry at my mother for getting sick. I know that's terrible, and I'd never say it to her face, but there are moments when I resent her for putting me in a position where I had to choose between her life and my freedom, and then I hate myself for feeling that way. That's not terrible. That's human. Adrian's fingers traced patterns on her shoulder. You're allowed to have complicated feelings about the people you love. Even about you? Especially about me. He kissed the top of her head. I'd be worried if you didn't. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, trading secrets and building trust one vulnerable moment at a time. But peace never lasted long in Adrian's world. 3 weeks after the shooting, Marcus brought news that shattered their fragile bubble of domestic happiness. The Castellanos have made a move, he told Adrian, with Lila sitting right there because they'd agreed. No more secrets. They've kidnapped 2 of our people, mid-level guys but loyal. They're demanding a meeting, you, alone, in exchange for the hostages. Obviously a trap, Adrian said calmly. Obviously. But if you don't show, they'll kill the hostages. Lila's hand found Adrian's, gripping tight. You can't go alone. I won't, but I do have to go. Adrian looked at Marcus. Set up the meeting, but have our people in position. If this goes south, I want the Castellanos destroyed, completely. No survivors, no mercy. Boss, if it comes to that, we're talking about war. Full-scale, bloody war. Then that's what it comes to. Adrian's voice was flat, final. They shot me. They threatened my wife. They kidnapped my people. I've been patient, tried to avoid escalation, but they keep pushing. So now they get to see what happens when I stop being patient. Marcus nodded and left to make arrangements. Lila turned to Adrian, fear and anger warring in her chest. This is insane. You're barely healed from the last time. I know, but I can't let them keep thinking they can hurt my people without consequences. What about me? What about the baby? Lila's voice cracked. What happens to us if you die playing hero? Adrian cupped her face in both hands, his expression intense. I'm not going to die. I'm going to end this threat permanently so that you and our child can be safe. So we can build the life we're trying to build without constantly looking over our shoulders. Our child? Lila repeated. You keep saying that like it's really yours. It is mine, in every way that matters. Adrian's hand moved to rest on her stomach, where the small bump was just barely visible. This baby is going to have my name, my protection, my love. Biology doesn't change that. Lila covered his hand with hers, tears streaming down her face. Come back to me. To us. Promise me you'll come back. I promise. Adrian kissed her fiercely. I have too much to lose now to be stupid about this. He left that night, taking 20 armed men with him. Lila waited in the penthouse with Caroline and Marcus, trying not to fall apart, trying to believe that Adrian would keep his promise. The call came at midnight. Marcus answered, listened, and his expression shifted from neutral to grim satisfaction. It's done, he said. The Castellanos are finished. Their leadership is dead. Their operations are being absorbed by our allies. There won't be any more threats from that family. And Adrian? Lila could barely breathe. Unharmed. He's on his way back now. Lila collapsed onto the couch, relief making her dizzy. Caroline wrapped an arm around her, and they waited together for Adrian to come home. When he finally walked through the door an hour later, dirty and exhausted but whole, Lila threw herself into his arms without caring about dignity or composure. Adrian caught her, holding her so tight it almost hurt, and she felt him shaking with adrenaline or emotion or both. It's over, he murmured against her hair. Really over. The Castellanos are done. No one else will come after you. I made sure of it. How? Brutally, decisively, in a way that will make everyone else think twice before they try something similar. Adrian pulled back to look at her face. I'm not proud of what I had to do tonight, but I'd do it again in a heartbeat to keep you safe. Lila kissed him, tasting smoke and violence and relief. No more, please. No more risks like that. No more, Adrian promised. From now on, we focus on us, on building something good instead of just destroying threats. And somehow, impossibly, Lila believed him. The weeks that followed the Castellano massacre were strange in their quiet normalcy. Adrian kept his promise. No more late-night confrontations. No more gunfights. No more blood-stained shirts appearing in the laundry. Instead, he threw himself into the legitimate side of his business empire with an intensity that surprised even Marcus. Lila watched him transform, slowly and imperfectly, from crime lord to something that looked almost like a regular businessman. He still had the dangerous edge, still commanded absolute loyalty from his people, but the violence became a last resort instead of a first response. You're changing, she said one morning, watching him review contracts over breakfast instead of surveillance reports. Adrian looked up from his laptop. Is that a problem? No, it's just different. Lila pushed scrambled eggs around her plate, her appetite still unpredictable in her second trimester. Good different. I'm trying to build something our daughter can be proud of. Something that won't get her killed or kidnapped because of who her father is. Adrian closed the laptop and reached for her hand. Speaking of which, we need to talk about security for when the baby comes. Lila groaned. Adrian, we've been over this. I don't want armed guards hovering over the nursery. I'm not suggesting armed guards in the nursery, just in the hallway, and maybe at the entrance to the wing, and definitely monitoring all access points to... You're doing it again, the overprotective thing. Adrian had the grace to look slightly sheepish. Can you blame me after everything that's happened? No, but you need to find a balance between protective and suffocating. Lila squeezed his hand. I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But we can't raise our daughter in a fortress. Watch me try, Adrian muttered, but he was smiling slightly. Caroline appeared in the doorway, looking healthier than she had in over a year. Her hair had grown back after the chemotherapy, short and silvery, and she'd regained most of the weight she'd lost. The most recent scans had shown no sign of cancer. Full remission, the doctors had declared, with cautious optimism about her long-term prognosis. Am I interrupting? Caroline asked. Never, Lila said, gesturing to a chair. Join us. Adrian was just trying to convince me our daughter needs a Secret Service detail. She needs reasonable protection, Adrian corrected. There's a difference. Caroline poured herself coffee, shooting Adrian an amused look. You know, when Lila was born, her father was convinced someone was going to steal her from the hospital. He inspected every nurse, questioned every doctor, and nearly got us kicked out for interrogating the janitor. See? Adrian said to Lila. It's a normal parental instinct. Her father was paranoid because he'd watched too many crime dramas. You're paranoid because you actually know people who kidnap babies. Exactly, which means my paranoia is justified. Lila threw a piece of toast at him. He caught it with a grin that made him look years younger, less like a crime lord and more like the man she was falling deeper in love with every day. The conversation shifted to lighter topics. Caroline's plans to volunteer at the medical center that had saved her life, the nursery decorating scheme Lila was considering, Adrian's ongoing efforts to convince Lila to marry him again in an actual ceremony. I still think it's unnecessary, Lila said. We're already married. But you didn't choose it the first time, Adrian argued, not for the first time. I want you to have the wedding you actually want, the dress, the flowers, the whole thing. What I actually want is to not be enormous and uncomfortable in a fancy dress. Lila gestured to her growing belly. Can we at least wait until after the baby is born? We can wait as long as you want. I'm just saying, whenever you're ready, I'll give you whatever kind of wedding you dream of. Caroline watched this exchange with barely concealed amusement. You two are good together. Despite everything, you fit. She was right, Lila thought. They did fit, in a way that made no logical sense given how they'd started. But sometimes the best things came from the worst circumstances. Sometimes you had to walk through hell to find something worth keeping. The pregnancy progressed, and with it came changes Lila hadn't anticipated. Her body transformed in ways that were both beautiful and uncomfortable. Adrian was fascinated by every development. The first time he felt the baby kick, he'd looked at Lila with such wonder that she'd cried. He talked to her belly every night, telling their daughter stories about his mother, about the legitimate business empire he was building, about all the ways her life would be different from his. You're going to have choices, he murmured one night, his hand spread across Lila's stomach. Real choices. About who you want to be, what you want to do. No one is going to force you into anything. I promise you that. Lila ran her fingers through his hair, her heart aching with love for this man who was trying so hard to break cycles of violence and control. She's lucky to have you as a father. I'm the lucky one. Adrian pressed a kiss to her belly. Both of you chose to keep her when you had every reason not to. You gave me a family I never thought I'd have. That's everything, Lila. That's the whole world. But the pregnancy wasn't without complications. At 28 weeks, Lila woke up to cramping and spotting. Adrian had her at the hospital within minutes, his face a mask of controlled terror, while doctors ran tests and monitors beeped anxiously. It's preterm labor, Dr. Chen explained, her expression serious. We've managed to stop it for now, but you're at high risk. Bed rest for the remainder of the pregnancy. No exceptions. How high risk? Adrian asked, his voice tight. If we can keep the baby in for another 6 weeks, her chances of survival are excellent. But Lila needs to be extremely careful. No stress, no physical exertion, constant monitoring. Lila spent the next 8 weeks confined to bed, and it nearly drove her crazy. Adrian converted their bedroom into a command center, bringing her everything she needed, working from a laptop beside her, barely leaving her side. Marcus and Caroline took turns keeping her company, but it was Adrian who was there every night, holding her hand through contractions that came and went, reading to her when she couldn't sleep, murmuring reassurances when she panicked about the baby being born too soon. "I'm scared," she admitted one night, tears streaming down her face. "What if something goes wrong? What if I lose her?" "You won't." Adrian pulled her carefully into his arms, mindful of all the monitoring equipment. "She's strong, just like her mother. She's going to be fine. You don't know that." "No, but I believe it, and I need you to believe it too." He kissed her temple. "We've come through worse than this. We'll come through this too." At 36 weeks, Lila's water broke in the middle of the night. The controlled chaos that followed was a blur of activity. Adrian barking orders at medical staff, Caroline appearing at her bedside, Dr. Chen's calm voice guiding her through contractions that came harder and faster than Lila had imagined possible. Labor lasted 14 hours. 14 hours of pain and fear, and Adrian's hand being crushed in hers, his voice in her ear telling her she was strong, she was amazing, she could do this. 14 hours of wondering if this baby conceived in violence would survive to see the world. And then, at 6:43 in the morning, their daughter was born. She came out screaming, angry at the world, her tiny fists waving in fury. The sound was the most beautiful thing Lila had ever heard. The nurse placed her on Lila's chest, and Lila looked down at this tiny, perfect person and felt something in her soul shift permanently. "She's here," Lila whispered, touching the baby's impossibly small fingers. "She's really here." Adrian stood beside the bed, tears streaming down his face without shame or attempt to hide them. "She's perfect. Lila, she's perfect." The baby had Lila's nose and chin, but her eyes, when she finally opened them, were dark like Adrian's. A genetic lottery that had nothing to do with biology, and everything to do with the fact that Adrian had claimed this child as his from the moment Lila decided to keep her. "What are we naming her?" Adrian asked, his voice rough with emotion. They'd discussed names but never settled on one. Now, looking at her daughter's face, Lila knew exactly what felt right. "Elena," she said. "After your mother." Adrian's expression crumpled. He sat down on the edge of the bed, careful not to jostle Lila or the baby, and pressed his face into Lila's shoulder. His body shook with silent sobs, and Lila held him with one arm while cradling Elena with the other, this man who'd been taught that love was weakness, finally allowing himself to feel it fully. "Thank you," he whispered against her skin. "For her. For this. For giving me a reason to be better." "You gave yourself that reason," Lila said. "I just reminded you it was possible." Caroline appeared in the doorway, took one look at the scene, and started crying too. They were a mess of tears and joy and exhaustion, this strange family built from desperation and trauma and stubborn hope. The first few weeks with Elena were brutal in ways Lila hadn't anticipated. The sleepless nights, the constant feeding, the anxiety that came with being responsible for this tiny, fragile life. But Adrian was there for all of it, changing diapers at 3 in the morning, walking the halls with Elena when she wouldn't stop crying, somehow knowing instinctively how to soothe her when Lila was too tired to function. "You're a natural," Lila said one night, watching him rock Elena back to sleep. "I'm terrified," Adrian admitted quietly. "Every single moment, I'm afraid I'm going to mess this up, that I'm going to fail her somehow. That fear means you care. It means you're taking this seriously." Lila reached for his hand. "You're doing great, Adrian. Better than great. You're the father she deserves." As Elena grew from newborn to infant, the penthouse transformed. The sterile, minimalist spaces gave way to baby equipment and colorful toys. Adrian's office was gradually taken over by a changing station. The formal living room became a play area. The fortress softened into something that actually felt like a home. Caroline's health remained stable, allowing her to be fully present as a grandmother. She spent hours with Elena, singing old lullabies and telling stories, giving Lila and Adrian moments to reconnect as a couple amid the chaos of new parenthood. 6 months after Elena's birth, Adrian brought up the wedding again. "I know we've been busy," he said, bouncing Elena on his knee while Lila folded tiny clothes. But I still want to do this properly. I want to marry you in front of everyone we love, with Elena there, so she can see the moment her mother chose to be my wife for real. Lila paused in her folding. You really won't let this go, will you? Never. Adrian grinned. I'm stubborn. You should know this about me by now. Fine. Lila threw a onesie at him. But small. Just family and close friends, nothing extravagant. Whatever you want. Adrian's smile was blinding. Just say yes. I already said yes once. Technically, I'm just saying yes again. Then say it again. Lila walked over to him, leaning down to kiss him while Elena giggled between them. Yes, Adrian Moretti. I'll marry you again. For real this time. The wedding took place 3 months later in the penthouse because Lila refused to make a spectacle of it. It was small and intimate, just Caroline, Marcus, and a few of Adrian's most trusted people, Dr. Chen, and the therapist who'd helped Lila process her trauma. Elena sat in Caroline's lap, making happy baby noises throughout the ceremony. Lila wore a simple cream dress that she'd chosen herself, comfortable and elegant without being flashy. Adrian wore his standard suit, but his eyes were soft in a way they never were in business meetings. This time, when the officiant asked if she took Adrian to be her husband, Lila answered with absolute certainty. I do. I choose this. I choose him. And when Adrian slipped the ring on her finger, a new one she'd helped select, his hands were steady. I promise to spend every day being worthy of this choice, to be the man you and Elena deserve, to build a life where love is strength, not weakness. The kiss was different from their first wedding kiss. This one was real, full of promise and hope, and the knowledge that they'd fought their way to this moment through hell and come out stronger. After the ceremony, after cake and champagne and tearful congratulations, Lila and Adrian stood together at the window, watching the city lights while Elena slept in her nursery down the hall. I need to show you something, Adrian said, pulling an envelope from his jacket pocket. Inside were legal documents. Lila scanned them, her eyes widening as she realized what she was reading. You dissolved the original contract, she said, her voice shaking. Months ago, actually, right after Elena was born. Adrian took the papers from her hands. The medical care for your mother continues regardless. That's in a separate trust that can never be revoked. But the contract that bound you to this marriage, it doesn't exist anymore. It hasn't existed for a while. You've been free to leave any time you wanted. Lila stared at him. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted today to mean something. I wanted you to choose me without any obligation hanging over us, without contracts or coercion or desperation, just you and me, making a real choice. Adrian cupped her face in his hands. You're free, Lila. You've always been free. You just choose to stay. Tears streamed down her face. You absolute bastard. You should have told me. Probably, but then you might have left before you realized you loved me. I wouldn't have left. Not after everything. Lila kissed him hard. I love you, you manipulative, overprotective, secretly romantic idiot, even though you still make unilateral decisions that drive me crazy. I'm working on that, Adrian said with a small smile. Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither is a reformed criminal. They stood there holding each other, this couple who'd started with the worst possible foundation and had somehow built something real and lasting from the wreckage. The next year brought more changes. Adrian's legitimate business empire expanded, and he formally separated himself from the criminal operations that had defined his early years. It wasn't easy. There were people who resented the shift, who saw his reforms as weakness. But Adrian was strategic and ruthless when he needed to be, making it clear that while he was choosing a different path, he was still not someone to be crossed. He established a foundation in his mother's name, focused on helping women and children escape domestic violence. Lila co-chaired it with him, using her own experience to shape programs that actually worked. Caroline volunteered there extensively, finding purpose in helping others the way she'd been helped. Elena grew into a bright, fierce toddler who had her mother's stubborn determination and her father's intensity. She was fearless in a way that terrified Adrian, climbing everything, afraid of nothing, demanding the world bend to her will. She's definitely your daughter, Lila said one afternoon, watching Adrian chase Elena around the living room. She's ours, Adrian corrected, scooping up a giggling Elena. In every way that matters. And he was right. Biology didn't determine family. Choice did. Love did. The decision to show up every day and do the hard work of building something good from difficult circumstances. On Elena's second birthday, Lila woke up to find Adrian already awake, watching her with an expression of quiet contentment. "What?" she asked, still groggy, just thinking about how far we've come. Adrian brushed her hair back from her face. 2 years ago, I would have told you that love was a weakness, that family was a liability, that the only thing that mattered was power and control. And now? Now I know that love is the only thing that matters, that family is what makes life worth living, that real power comes from choosing to be vulnerable with the right person. He kissed her softly. "You taught me that. You and Elena. You changed everything." Lila pulled him closer. "We changed each other. That's how this works. That's what makes it real." Later that day, surrounded by wrapping paper and cake crumbs and Elena's delighted laughter, Lila looked around at the life they'd built. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was. They still argued, still had hard days, still struggled with the weight of their past and the complexity of their present. Adrian still had nightmares about his father, still sometimes defaulted to control when he was scared. Lila still had moments of panic about the circumstances of Elena's conception, still sometimes woke up feeling trapped before remembering she'd chosen to stay. But they had this messy, complicated, beautiful family, this home they'd built from desperation and determination, this love they'd fought for and earned and chosen every single day. Caroline pulled Lila aside while Adrian was showing Elena how to open another present. "You did good, baby," she said, her eyes bright with tears. "You took an impossible situation and turned it into something wonderful." "We did," Lila corrected. "All of us. Together." That night, after Elena was asleep and Caroline had retired to her own apartment in the building, a space Adrian had insisted on providing so she could be close but still have independence, Lila and Adrian collapsed onto the couch together. "Successful birthday?" Adrian asked, pulling her against his side. "Exhausting birthday, but yes, successful." Lila looked up at him. "Thank you for all of this, for becoming someone Elena can be proud of, for building this life with me. Thank you for giving me the chance, for seeing something in me worth saving." Adrian's hand found hers, their fingers interlacing. "I know I don't say it enough, but I'm grateful. Every single day I'm grateful you chose to stay, that you chose us." Lila thought about that first night in his office, when he'd made his brutal offer and she'd accepted out of sheer desperation. She thought about all the anger and resentment she'd carried, all the ways she'd fought against the cage he'd built around her. She thought about the moment everything changed, when they'd stopped being captor and captive and started being partners. It hadn't been smooth. It hadn't been easy. Real change never was. But they'd done it anyway, slowly and imperfectly, choosing each other over and over again until the choice became natural. "I don't regret it," Lila said quietly. "Any of it. Not anymore. Because it brought me here, to this moment, to this family, and I wouldn't trade that for anything." Adrian pressed a kiss to her temple. "Neither would I." They sat in comfortable silence, wrapped around each other, while the city sparkled outside their window. Somewhere down the hall, Elena slept peacefully, surrounded by the security and love they'd fought so hard to build for her. Somewhere in the building, Caroline rested in her own space, healthy and whole and grateful for the second chance at life. And here, in this moment, Lila and Adrian held each other and understood a truth that had taken them too long to learn. Sometimes the worst circumstances could lead to the best outcomes. Sometimes you had to walk through fire to find what you were meant to protect. Sometimes love looked nothing like you expected, arrived in the most painful way possible, and still managed to be the realest, truest thing you'd ever known. Their story had started with coercion and desperation, with a contract signed under duress and a marriage built on lies. But it had become something else entirely, a partnership forged in trauma and strengthened by choice, a family created not by biology or circumstance, but by stubborn determination to build something good from the wreckage. It wasn't a fairy tale. There was no magic moment where everything became perfect. Adrian still had darkness in him, still made ruthless decisions when protecting his family. Lila still had scars from what she'd endured, still had days when the trauma caught up with her. Elena would grow up knowing her origin story was complicated, that her conception was an act of violence that her parents had chosen to transform into something beautiful. But they had each other. They had honesty, hard-won and precious. They had love that had been tested and proven stronger than fear, stronger than shame, stronger than the worst things that had been done to them. And in the end, that was everything. Years from now, when Elena was old enough to understand, they would tell her the truth. All of it. The contract, the rape, the violence, and fear that had marked the beginning of their family. But they would also tell her about the choice. The moment when Lila decided to keep her. When Adrian decided to claim her. When two broken people decided that love was worth fighting for, even when it came wrapped in trauma and pain. They would tell her that families aren't defined by how they begin, but by what they choose to become. That the best things can grow from the worst circumstances if you're brave enough to nurture them. That real strength isn't about power or control, but about vulnerability and trust, and showing up even when it's hard. They would tell her that her mother was the bravest person her father had ever met, and that her father had spent every day trying to be worthy of that bravery. That sometimes love looks like giving up everything, and sometimes it looks like building everything from nothing, and sometimes it looks like choosing to stay when leaving would be easier. But that was a conversation for the future. For now, they simply held each other in the quiet darkness, grateful for the life they'd built, the family they'd created, the love they'd discovered in the last place either of them expected to find it. Lila's hand found Adrian's, their rings catching the light from the city below. The original contract was gone, destroyed. The coercion had faded into history. What remained was choice, pure and simple. The choice to love, to trust, to build a life together, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. And that choice, renewed every day through every challenge and triumph, was the strongest foundation any family could have. In the nursery down the hall, Elena stirred in her sleep, safe and loved and surrounded by parents who would move heaven and earth to protect her. In her own apartment, Caroline slept peacefully, her body free of cancer, her heart full of gratitude for the daughter who'd sacrificed everything and the son-in-law who'd made it possible. And here, in the room where this story had begun with fear and desperation, Lila and Adrian held each other and knew they'd found something rare and precious, a love that had survived its own terrible beginning and emerged stronger, deeper, more real than anything either of them had dared to dream was possible. The past would always be part of them, written into their bones and scars and memories. But it didn't define them. Not anymore. They'd taken that pain and built something beautiful from it, proving that sometimes the best endings come from the worst beginnings, and that the truest love is the kind you fight for, earn, and choose every single day. Their story wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, completely and absolutely, built on truth and choice and the stubborn belief that love could bloom even in the darkest soil. And in the end, that was more than enough. It was everything.